Hello, a pleasure being here. I'm going to be talking about three colors and three cultures. Let's see why. Polarization is a big problem nowadays that is dividing friends, families, countries, regions, mainly because of two perspectives in conflict, liberal and conservative. Liberals care for the future, the challenges of the future. Conservative care for the past, the best from the past. Deep down, this division comes from three ways our brains are wired, which explains the things we value, and values are the bricks while cultures are the buildings. Thus, there is a connection between brain wiring, values, and cultures. Some people think that because there are around 200 countries in the world, there should also be 200 cultures. I will try to show you why I think that as long as we distinguish the three primary cultures, we may be able to reduce polarization. You may think three cultures are too few, but remember, there are only three primary colors to make all the tonalities in the rainbow. Polarization makes us lean towards familiar news content. Back in the 50s, people were exposed to two sides of each news story, thanks to a policy known as the fairness doctrine. However, by the end of the 80s, US lobbyists removed it, and US news media began telling just one-sided stories, so we arrive at the information silos that deeply divide our societies today. Most people feel more comfortable talking to those that think alike. It reinforces a feeling of identity, belongingness, group loyalty, all happily swimming in the same pond. But remember, fish can't see water. We cannot see our cultures from inside. The evolution of mankind developed into three primary cultures. The first one, from the onset of the agricultural revolution, cultures of honor, with a political emphasis on leadership, loyalty, hierarchy, obedience. The second one, cultures of achievement, with an economic emphasis on success, performance, productivity, punctuality, since the onset of the Industrial Revolution. The third one, cultures of joy, with a social emphasis on friends, family, having fun, outdoor life. Is anyone better than the other? To know, it all depends on your brain wiring to prefer respect, money, or happiness. Let's now move to the second part of this talk. I'll share how I became aware of the three cultures, mainly through a process of multiple culture shocks after living 18 years in achieving countries while I was born in a joy country, Mexico. When I was 25, I won a scholarship to study a one-year master in public administration at the University of Warwick in England. My first culture shock was getting a copy of the train schedule and noticing the arrivals and departure times were quoted in fraction of minutes. 8:03, 10:17, and so on. No way trains would arrive as scheduled, I thought. But they did. Shocking. I was clearly thinking about the concept of timing in Mexico. When I turned 30, I returned to England to study for a PhD on political science in the London School of Economics. I volunteered for a presentation at the first seminar. As soon as I finished, a classmate on my left said, he disagreed with what I had said. What? In Mexico, That was an invitation to a fight. My blood started boiling and I stopped listening. However, since nobody else showed any reaction, I just stayed calm. On my right, another classmate said, she liked what I said. Then a third participant took a bit of each and elaborated further. At that point, I started cooling down, began listening again. To my surprise, that open exchange of frank opinions was valuable and constructive. Another cultural shock. I could go on, but let's stop here. After many shocks, I began wondering what was wrong with English people. A few years later, I found an explanation on Max Weber's book, The Protestant Ethic, the difference of values between Protestants and Catholics. Protestantism encouraged people to be punctual, productive, competitive, standing out, while Catholicism taught people to enjoy life, make friends, be flexible, blend down. However, during a work trip to Japan in '84, those types of questions exploded in my mind. Why did workers in Japan work faster during a union strike rather than slower? What explained the ultra punctuality dedication towards perfectionism, respect to others, silence that was unnoticeable in Japan? There had to be a further explanation. 2 years later, I published my first article on the topic titled Combative and Contemplative Cultures. That was the first label I used for cultures of achievement and honor, respectively. In 1990, I was invited by a University of Michigan professor, Ron Inglehart, to join the now well-known World Value Survey Group, an organization that has been collecting surveys every 5 years, asking people around the world about 300 questions in a face-to-face interview to understand values. It is the largest data bank on values in the world. They needed to conduct the second wave of the survey in Mexico, and I had just made a name in the polling world by conducting the first electoral poll of Mexico's presidential election in '88. I became fascinated at the possibility of testing my ideas empirically using data from the 42 countries back then, and off I went to dive into the topic, not to swim, to dive into the topic. Today, this survey has been conducted in 107 countries. 3 years later, during a summer stay in Michigan, analyzing the World Values fresh data, I tried something that surprisingly had never been done before: to use the two values that separated the most Protestant and Catholics as axes to plot religions. Thus, almost by chance, I created the first cultural map. The two axes that emerged were in the vertical axis, trust and distrust in strangers, and in the horizontal axis, obedience and autonomy. Weber was right. Protestants were trusting and autonomous, whereas Catholics were distrusting and obedient. The world values question that made up this map were: do you think most people can be trusted? Agreeing means trusting strangers, disagreeing means distrusting. You should love and respect your parents no matter what. Agreeing means obedience, disagreeing means valuing autonomy. As you can see, we found 9 cultural zones by religion rather than 200 by country. That was the belief back then. And that reduction from 200 to 9 was a huge advancement in the study of cultures. At the very top right, we found the achieving Protestants, highly autonomous and trusting, together with Jewish, Confucianism, and no religion. While in the bottom left quadrant are Catholics together with Orthodox and Muslims, distrusting of strangers and obedient. On the upper left quadrant, Buddhist and Hindu. In 2004, at the World Values Meeting in Budapest, I proposed that the 9 cultural zones should be further compacted, but I was not able to continue working on this until 2008, when I was invited by Tufts University to direct the Cultural Change Institute of the Fletcher School. There I began my empirical research on the 3 cultures. Honor and achievement cultures were academically well established. Honor was introduced by Richard Nisbett, a Michigan professor that born in a small town in Texas, and a culture that had covered the world for 12 millennia, but now is mainly noticeable in India, Russia, the Arab world, and African countries. Achievement cultures, introduced by David McLellan, was an outcome of Confucianism plus the weird countries as defined by Joseph Henry's book. That is, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic, where most of the academic research is directed today. But joy cultures were unknown. From my own research, I noticed that something else was missing, and it was joy culture. Coincidentally, about halfway through of my 18 years out of Mexico, I began to notice that I missed the warmth characteristic of cultures of joy. Like spending time with friends with no specific purpose, enjoying the now without guilt, the spontaneity of improvisation, or the flexibility of time. There is a more interest now in cultures of joy as the measurement of happiness illustrates by the rankings from United Nations, Bhutan, the Gallup organization, in addition to the pioneer attention we did in the World Values Survey Group. Cultures of joy are more prevalent in Latin America and the Caribbean countries, or those countries with good climate, plus the hybrid cases of Spain, Italy, and France. Cultures of joy also share many of the values of honor and achievement, but with less intensity. Let's now move to the final part of the talk. The table on the screen summarizes the evolution of 125 years of the study of cultures and values. In the first column, you see 8 different authors, all talking about the same ideas, just with different names. As you see from the first row, Weber was the first to write about the 3 rationalities: traditions, goals, and emotions. McLellan was the first to use the achievement label, and Nisbett the first to use the honor label. Then 2 professors and myself, Shalom Schwartz, a psychologist from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and Everman de Vlier from the Netherlands, who study world climates, without knowing about each other's work and through totally different methodologies, we arrive at the same conclusions, that there are 3 primary cultures. Although we use different labels, we were referring to the same 3 cultures. In cultures of honor, what matters the most is to quickly retaliate to maintain one's reputation, to strictly enforce rules, or to be obedient and respectful of authority and hierarchy. In cultures of achievement, what matters is to succeed, to be productive, to plan for the future, to be punctual, to take initiative. In contrast, in cultures of joy, it matters to have friends, enjoy the now, be flexible with time, be quick to improvise. At the individual level, each of us can identify what percentage of each culture we hold, as we all are essentially mostly hybrids. Bottom line, it comes down to the three prototypes of brain wiring, which in turn explain the values we prefer, which in turn those values build cultures. Now, three limitations. All of the three cultures have pros and cons, positives and negatives, as everything in life. Two, all countries have pockets of people with either honor, achievement, or joy values. And three, the country's dominant culture depends on the main religion, the legal system, and the country's traditions/customs. In conclusion, can accepting the three cultures model help reduce polarization? I think so. It matters to be aware of the three different types of brain wiring, honor, achievement, and joy, when we interact with others. Try to detect which of the three they hold and in what proportions. That may help you to understand their thinking. Get used to swimming in different ponds. My final message: travel, travel, travel. In your city, in your state, in your country, or abroad if you can, just to talk to other people and learn from conversation. You'll be surprised. Be open to get culture shocked. Thank you.